Well, my body lies over the ocean. My body lies over the sea. Ooh, my body lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my body to me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Scott Arizala Show from camphacker.tv. My name is Travis Allison. Hello, Scott. How are you today?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I am fantastic, and I'm excited to be back and on with our next show today.
Absolutely. Today we're going to talk a little bit about active listening. And I wanted to bring this one sort of back up, I guess, because it seems to be one of those skill sets that, as camp directors, as youth development professionals, we feel really good at. We feel like we've got that one. Most of us train our young people to do it. I think almost all of us would argue that it's one of the most important skills when you're working with kids. And I think when you have a skill like that, when you have a sort of foundation piece like that, I think that can drum up some complacency with all of us. And my personal belief is that listening is one of those things you can never check off the list. You can never say, well, I've done that one, I'm good at it, let's move on. It's something that we always have to keep working at, and we always have to keep sort of growing and evolving around. So I wanted to sort of bring it back up and talk a little bit about what I think we need to do as professionals to sort of stay on top of our game a little bit.
Right. That's awesome. So, Scott, you have you want to start by talking about an app which happens to be one of my favorites.
Yes, absolutely. The Read Quick app, or Quick Read app. One of the two. You can look at it. What is it?
Read Quick.
Read Quick app, yeah. So I can't remember where I was reading about this app. It was in a journal or a magazine somewhere, and they were talking about this app as a way for folks with dyslexia and maybe some other visual disabilities to become more proficient at reading. And I was thrilled with it. And basically, for those of you who have never seen this app before, what it does is it takes an email, an article, whatever you're reading, and flashes just one word up at a time, right in the middle of your screen, whether it's your phone or your iPad or whatever. And you can sort of set the pace at which you're seeing these one words. And what's happening for folks that have a hard time reading is they're able to read much more proficiently. They're able to take in a lot more. The reading comprehension is there. And they're actually able to read faster. And then at the end of the article, it talks about how folks are now picking up this app as sort of a speed reading application. So something that's just like getting everybody better at reading. And I was so thrilled with this, and I was so interested in it. I thought really, I sort of thought a long time about it, and I wanted to apply the same idea to listening. And I know reading and listening are two totally different things. But what I thought was so interesting about the Quick Read app is that it's one thing at a time. And that is, I think, one of the things that we need to remember or we sort of lose, especially on our level, and especially the level of camp professionals and youth development professionals, people who have been in the game a long time, people who are running programs, people who are supervising a lot of people. We tend to try to listen to everything all at once. And I think the lesson we can take from the Quick Read app is we need to listen for sort of one thing at a time. And that's not to say that in a conversation we're having with a staff member or with a group of staff or with kids that there aren't a lot of things coming at us that we need to pay attention to. It's more that I want us to sort of concentrate on one thing at a time. And if I were to break down what I think those things are, it would be along the lines, sort of three things. We need to be listening for something that we need to know in this conversation. So a staff member has come to me, they're complaining about something, they're telling me about something. The question I kind of want to be asking is, what do I need to know out of this conversation? What's the sort of big thing, the big sort of takeaway, take-home point? I also need to be listening for sort of the one thing I might need to do out of this particular conversation. Do I need to change a policy? Do I need to go have a conversation? Do I need to go observe something else so I can see it in action myself? So on and so forth. What maybe do I need to do? And then what's the sort of kind of emotional buy-in, I guess? What's the thing I need to believe or the thing I need to feel coming out of this conversation? Do I need to understand how this person is really enraged about this, is really frustrated about this? Is it frustrating me because it's something that I've talked a lot about to my staff and now I'm seeing it not happen? What is it? And if we can kind of listen for these one things at a time, these certain things, I think that's going to lead us to the sort of next step in in conversation and in listening that I think is, incredibly important.
So, Scott, just to wrap that up, those three things are know, do, and feel?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. So the three things we're looking for in a conversation is to what I need to know out of this, what I have to do with it, and what emotional response I should have to what's going on.
Yeah, and that last one is the toughest one, right? Because we can talk about listening in so many ways, and one of the things that I always want to talk about when it comes to listening is being accessible, being approachable to your staff. And certainly there are going to be things that you hear all summer long, all year long, that piss you off and make you want to freak out and make you want to react in some really emotional way. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we need to listen for that and then jump on it and then freak out because, there's the neurovirus has hit camp or whatever. I mean, that's a major thing that we want to be concerned about, but nobody ever wants to come to a supervisor or anybody who's going to freak out every time, you're telling them something. So it's more of okay, gauging, I guess, your emotional reaction to it and understanding what kind of energy that then puts into the follow-up.
So as a camp staff person, how do you go about engaging on this level with the conversation? Sure.
I think when I teach listening to my young people and to other camps that I'm training with, there are really three things that I talk about. There was a big research study, sort of ongoing body of work that came out of two communication specialists at UCLA. And this body of work started out 20 or 30 years ago, so it's been something that they've drawn on and they've built over the years, and it basically takes a look at when you're, there's sort of a lot of ins and outs in this, so I'm going to dumb this way down for my purposes, but the sort of overarching thing is what they said is they looked at what do people hear when I'm speaking to them, and they didn't break it down as individuals or one person to a group or one person to kids or one person to adults. It's just that sort of overall approach of when I'm talking, what do you hear? Whether you as a group or an individual or kids or adults, it doesn't matter. And what they found was this, and I think this is really fascinating. It breaks down into sort of three different categories. Sort of the meaning that you get when I'm speaking to you comes from 7% of that meaning comes from the words that I'm using. Now, that 7% is actually a really interesting statistic because you kind of feel like, well, you're getting all the meaning because you can understand the language that I'm speaking and you can understand the actual words. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. But that 7% acts as sort of the way they describe it, sort of acts as sort of the scaffolding or maybe even better yet, like the sort of bones, the structure of the meaning, right? But yet it's only 7%, which I thought was really interesting. And then they go on to describe that 38% of the meaning that you get from when somebody's talking to you is from the tone. So it's like how they're using the words that they're using, not just the words. And then that for me sort of draws a much clearer picture then. And so all of a sudden it's not just the words, but it's how I'm using the words. And oftentimes I'll talk about, for example, for those of you who have a dog, it's a perfect example of this. It absolutely does not matter what you say to the dog. It matters how you say it. Or same if you have real young kids. And now, Travis, I'm not telling anybody or you to treat young kids like you treat your dog. But what I am saying is that it's similar, right? It's like the way your sort of tone is, people sort of gather or can take on some of that information. To be honest, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of us can get along fairly well in a place where whatever language they're speaking isn't our first language.
Right.
Because you can kind of gather from how people are talking, the sort of pace at which they're talking, and then of course that leads to the third thing that these guys at UCLA found, which is 55% of the messages that people get when you're speaking to them come from body language, come from how your body looks, how your face looks. Are you pointing in one direction or another? You're in a foreign country, you're asking for the bathroom, and somebody's sort of pointing in one direction. It's pretty clear that that's the direction that you need to go. So, and then you start orienting your body and all that. So, long story short, what does that mean for listening? Well, I think it means that, if that's what we know we're sort of hearing, right, then we can start, or we know that's what people are hearing when we're talking. I mean, it works in both directions. Then we can start, I think, to cultivate some skills around that, right? Not only in how we're talking, but again, this particular episode is about active listening, right? So how can I cultivate more of meaning when I'm looking at somebody's body, right? I always say that to young people that I'm training. Watch the kids, like watch their body when they're talking to you. A really great example of this for when you're working with kids is when you get a kid who's really homesick. Most kids who are homesick, it's so interesting what they do with their body. They sort of pull it in and they almost collapse in on themselves, right? That body language speaks volumes.
Right. But this reminds me, Scott, and just as I say it out loud, I think it may be an interesting training technique. Our mutual friend Dan Weir at Frost Valley Y has a story about a parent who called him up really upset because they posted a photo of a counselor just ripping into their kid. And the parent was like, I can't believe that, one, that this happens at Frost Valley, and two, that you'd be dumb enough to post it. And Dan looked up the photo. He's like, okay, what was your child? And looked up the photo and realized that it was a counselor who was in the middle of leading some song at a table with the kids. And it was a hot day. So he's all red and kind of sweaty, and he's just yelling. But she can't see. All she can see is his body and his face just sort of aimed at this kid. And to call him, she's like, why is this counselor yelling? He's like, no, this is just him having fun.
I think that's a perfect example of this, right? Because we read more than half of what we hear, what we're listening to, literally comes from the body, right? And that is a perfect example of a misread. You know, I often talk to staff about and leadership, and this is actually a huge leadership component of listening. I will ask staff or leadership all the time. If you're going to go, you know, if I'm talking to staff, it's if you're going to talk to a kid, if I'm talking to leadership, if you're going to talk to an adult, they have something critical to say. Maybe it's a bad behavior, maybe it was a bad choice by a staff member, maybe it's just something you want them to do better, whatever it is. Where are you going to do this? And 9 times out of 10, they get the right answer, which is away from the kids, away from the staff. Absolutely, right? And then I often say, okay, but physically, tell me where that is. And often they'll go on to say, well, just kind of right over there, right? You know, we just want to get out of earshot. We don't want kids to hear. And then I often will have them sort of role play what that conversation sounds like. And so often, right, the negativity of the meaning comes from the body language. Their face scrunches up like this. They start doing things like they'll count on their fingers about the amount of times that this has happened, right? They maybe do some pointing, like all this kind of stuff. And I say, okay, now, if you're the kid sitting over there, the other staff sitting over there, you're certainly out of earshot, and I appreciate that. But what are you looking at over there? You know, you're looking at somebody getting in trouble, right? The same can be said for me pulling somebody aside and being like, can I talk to you for a minute? Pulling them over and being like, that was incredible what you just did with that. All those kids were so engaged. That was amazing. I can't believe you had the game station going, you had the water balloons going, you had the soccer going. It was just incredible. Now, if you were to like take away the audio behind what I just did, the way my face looked, the way I was doing, could all be misinterpreted the same way. So again, back to the idea of active listening, right? We need to really concentrate on what they look like while they're talking to us so that we can get more sort of a better fabric of what they're saying.
Is there any final wrap up to this active listening session, Scott, that you want to give us?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the final sort of big skill that I always talk about when it comes to active listening is your ability to paraphrase, your ability to say something back in a really natural, normal way, and that's something that everybody has got to work on. You know, I say a lot of times, I say stuff like, so wait, let me just make sure I'm getting this right, and then I sort of translate it over. I never use the same words as my staff member or the kids that are talking to me, but I try to just translate it into my own idea. Like, am I hearing this right? Are you saying, you know, is this what you're saying? And then I sort of, you know, I say it as a question that kind of gives them an opportunity to sort of affirm it, add to it, say, no, you're not getting it, whatever. But this idea of paraphrasing back and forth, I think, is really important because it's the indicator that you're you're doing the sort of mental exercise of understanding, which that's the hard part of listening, right? It's easy to do it's easier to do the physical part, right? Kind of look at somebody in the eye and smile and nod and, kind of look like you're thinking and go, oh, okay, really, and maybe write something down and then move on, right? And you could not really have heard any of it. But paraphrasing really makes you do sort of the mental jumping jack to get this going. And at the end of the day, the reason why I wanted to talk to youth development professionals on our level about this is because we role model this directly. This is one of those direct skills we role model for staff that, again, turn around and do it with kids. And that is, at the end of the day, I could make the argument that listening to kids may be the most important skill that we can teach our young people. So.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you very much, Scott. For those of you who are watching, we hope that you will, on the YouTube, just click subscribe to this button. If you heard anything that you liked during Scott's presentation, the stuff that he's been talking about, then click the like button as well. We'd be really grateful for that. Thanks very much for watching, everybody. I'm Travis Allison from camphacker.tv. And Scott?
Yes, thank you so much for tuning in and watching. If you want to find out more about what I do, you can check me out at thecampcounselor.com. You can also check out my new subscription service it's a staff training resource at campcounselor.com/insider. We really appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you next summer.
Well, my body